Today we're looking at real numbers and their properties. And real numbers, you'll notice, are separated into rational numbers and irrational numbers. And over here, these irrational numbers are non-repeating, non-terminating decimals. So if you take a look at these decimals, they go on and on and on, no pattern. Versus over on the left, our rational numbers, we have fractions and we have decimals. They can be repeating decimals, also integers and whole numbers. Another thing you might be asked to do in this lesson is to order your values. So when we want to do that, we're going to change everything either to decimals or to fractions. So I changed everything already to decimals. The 7/10, you could do 7 divided by 10 and get you 0.7, although 7/10 is pretty straightforward. And then the square root of 2 is 1.4142, and then you just place them on the number line. I made a number line since my smallest number was -4, then I did equidistance from 0, and I made my largest number 4, and then just plot those points. So I've plotted my points. I left them in their original form, the 7/10 and the square root of 2. And remember, the square root of 2 is actually 1.4, which is nearly 1.5, so it lies between 1 and 2. And I understand my increments didn't come out very equidistant, but sorry about that. So the properties, you should be familiar with these from previous courses, but closure, so we're looking at, again, real numbers. The closure says that if we have the real number a plus b, the answer is going to be a real number. So if I had 3 plus 5, we know we're going to get a real number, which is 8. Commutative property just says that order does not matter for addition and multiplication. Associative property, the grouping symbols just change. So we could have 2 plus 3 plus 5 equals 2 plus, now it's 3 plus 5 in the parentheses. Identity property for addition means if we add a 0, the result is not going to change. And the identity property for multiplication is when we multiply by 1. And finally, the inverse is if I have a positive and we add the inverse, it's going to be we're adding a negative. But for multiplication, the inverse is actually the reciprocal. And notice that the denominator a here cannot be equal to 0 because if you remember, that's undefined. And finally, distributive property, which you've used probably quite a lot. A times b is ab and a times c is ac. So if we put in some numbers, let's say 3, 2 plus 1, and we're going to go ahead and distribute. We end up with 3 times 2 is 6. Ooh, this is pretty thick. And 3 times 1 is 3. And we get 9. And if I said 3 times the quantity 3, we still get 9. Okay, we're going to finish up with some practice with our properties. So if we look at the first one, take a moment and think about the property. It's the distributive property. We would say 4 times 5 and 4 times 25. The second one, identity property of multiplication. Because if we multiply by 1, we get 500, which it doesn't change its identity, it stays the same. The third one, think about that one. Associative property, because The 2 and the 3 are associating on the left, but then the 3 is now associating with the 9. And then the final one, it's identity property of addition. We can add a 0 and it does not change the identity of the 15. And you made it through your first official video.